Watching this, it means that we've surrendered. We're just waiting for the command now to lay down our arms and head towards the Russian soldiers.
My constituent Aiden Aslin has served in the Ukrainian armed forces for 4 years. Last week, he was captured by the Russian army in Mariupol.
But after a trial lasting a few days and their confessions to being mercenaries, Aiden Aslin and Sean Pinner were convicted and sentenced to death for terrorism by the so-called Donetsk People's Republic.
At the start of our interviews, we tend to ask our interviewees to introduce themselves. But I think it's more interesting if I asked you how your introduction has changed since your time in Ukraine. Have you changed the way you present yourself to others?
I would say yes, I think. Like previously before, I used to like mention like whenever like people asked me to introduce themselves, I'd mention I was like in Syria with the Kurdish YPG, etc. Now I have to go into a long introduction, like just telling people I was in Syria, and then I have to go like saying I've been serving in the Ukrainian military. And then of course, because of that was such a long period of time, I was like 4 years in the military there, and then have to add on the part where I was captured and then like sentenced to death and then being exchanged and like being like released basically. So yeah, the introduction has definitely changed a lot like over the years.
Yeah, no, thank you. And have you faced some sort of stigma because of that? When you meet somebody and you tell them about that, and let's say they have no background about that, have they shown sign of, some sort of distancing?
Not really. It's more a lot of it's just like the typical like, oh, glad you're back. Like after a while, like in public anyway, like after a while, kind of just gets a bit tiring because you keep hearing like the same like questions or the same like sort of responses. Not that I'm like not being polite or anything. It's just a lot of it gets tiring, like having to repeat the same answers and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And yeah, obviously, you talked about your time in Ukraine. And I always see, on your Instagram, stuff like that, you always talk about how the Russian state was using you as well for propaganda based on your persona.
Yeah.
And has this affected you or your own self-esteem? How have you responded to this?
Well, before I was captured, I made some calls to my like family. I spoke to my friend on the phone. I spoke to my friend on the phone, basically like telling him we're about to surrender, and I said to him like I am going to be used for propaganda, like 100%. They'll be stupid not to. Um, and the Russians, I don't know why they decided to release this phone call of me like saying I'm going to be used for like bullshit propaganda. I have no understanding why they released it. But like when I was going to surrender, I knew 100% I'd be used for propaganda, and I think it took maybe 2 days until like the guys like turned up with their cameras and whatnot, and like as soon as they turned up, I was like, okay, like I figured like okay, I've got to like do what I've got to do to get through this. So like the vast majority of it was just bullshitting as much as I could and trying to just give them stuff that they could get from like the internet or stuff like that, and just try to blag it to a degree. Um, like since I've been released, there haven't really been any like any stigmas or anything like from it. Like a lot of people, like everyone's always said the same thing, like you're in captivity, like you do what you do to survive.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And about that, as your experiences of a prisoner of war and knowing that you've essentially been put on death row, what did you see? And obviously, I suppose it did take a toll on you mentally and physically. And so tell us about it a bit, if you're comfortable with it, of course. Have there been
Yeah,
any
yeah, of course.
violations of human rights? Just, about your experience.
So obviously when we surrendered, our commander, like the Russians asked us, like, who do we want to surrender to? Like, do you want to surrender to the Russians or do you want to surrender to the DPR? Obviously, my commander said to the Russians because at least at that stage we thought it might be better But once we surrendered to the Russians, like to the Russian soldiers, and then the Russian soldiers like transferred us to the DPR. And as soon as I got there, like every like blatant like violation. I mean, I can give some leeway like in the first like the first points of like handling. You know, like when they were like processing us like for the first time, like when we were like literally just like surrendered. They took my passport and they asked me like where I'm from. And you know, I got manhandled, I got punched a few times, but it wasn't like a proper beating or anything. I can like kind of give leeway to that, like it's frontline soldiers. There's like more of a mutual like not there's like more of a mutual respect in that kind of regards. Like if it's hard to describe, but there wasn't any major like issues. I mean, I got beat, but it wasn't like a proper beating at that point. It wasn't until the day after when I got taken from the filtration facility and taken to Donetsk, where when the interrogation and like torture methods and everything else started. So once I got there, like I saw like blatant like violations and stuff. Like there was people being like duct taped up and just beaten for hours. People were being electrocuted. I didn't get electrocuted, thankfully. I was beaten though for like 2 hours, like just non-stop. I got stabbed. Then they like did my testimony interrogation. Obviously, I did the video just before I surrendered. I made the video like an hour before we went to surrender, just like telling people I'm alive, etc. Because I was a bit scared that if I did go, someone might kill me or something. So at least people know I'm still alive before I surrendered. And then 2 days later, like the Russians like had me on video with this like huge fucking like just I just looked like I'd been beat the shit out of. Had a huge fucking like open like gash on my like forehead. Like and then obviously once they got to the prison after that, like after the first month, it kind of got a bit easier, but still there was still like human right violations going on. In the prison I was in like a it was basically a solitary confinement cell like pre-war. So there was like two beds in the basement, and I was in there with like four people. No blankets, no pillow, open window, and you know at that point it was in I think it was in May time, so it was still pretty cold at like night, especially if there's no like sun on your side. You know, we were forced to sing the Russian anthem. If we didn't sing it, they would beat us. Um, Obviously, when new arrivals come to the prison, they get beat. That you have to do a gauntlet to go to your prison cell. So like you lay down and you crawl, and while you do this, you've got a bag on your head, and then you get beat as you like crawl to your cell. And then at one point, there was also one guy who did the gauntlet, but he obviously wasn't like his body was like basically just giving up. So eventually he got into his cell, and then one of the guards just like basically beat him to death because his body just gave up and he went unconscious. And the guy came in and said he was sleeping, so he just beat him some more, and then he just like died. Um, so yeah, I've seen like blatant like human right violations. I mean we're prisoners at well from a realistic standpoint, being like going into like captivity by your enemy, you expect to get a bit like a bit of a like punch around. I mean that's normal. I would say be fair to say that every military in the world has done that at some point, and it's pretty normal for that sort of like area. It's not going to be like a day in the park. It's going to be a bit rough, etc. But like from what I saw, like it went past that point where like people were just being tortured or fucking beaten just out of sadistic like desire.
And you know, now that you know you've experienced all this, if you could go back in time, would you still, you know, join that fight, join that political struggle?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I've been served like I said, I've been serving for like 4 years. The fact that I'm still here, like I would still go back and do everything if I knew I was going to go through everything because the fact I'm here, I'm still alive. Like it gives me the opportunity to speak for those that are still in captivity or those that were killed in captivity, so that I can help like raise awareness about what we went through and like what happened in there, because like without our voices, like people on the outside won't really know, like to a large degree.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting you mentioned, how you can share your experiences, stuff like that. How has social media played a role in let's say dealing with everything you've experienced after you left Ukraine? Did it enable you to sort of perhaps put the burden or a mental burden away in some way?
Yeah, so when I started my Instagram account, Cossack Gundi, I think I started it back in 2018. It was sort of a way for me to like at the time I was like still dealing with some stuff from Syria. I basically like used it as a way to like take my mind off stuff or project it onto the account, and eventually it started gaining a following. And then that kind of helped as well, like kind of motivated me to keep like focus on it and like keeping people informed and telling people about like my experience that interests people. Um, and then afterwards, it's like helped me a lot because like it takes my mind off myself and like to the social media accounts to like to just keep the message going and keep the awareness going.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, that's good to hear, the fact that you can still somehow share your stories all while it helping you sort of deal with it afterwards. And obviously now with social media, are you still in contact with some of your colleagues or soldiers that were there as well?
Yeah, so when I got released, I was released with my battalion commander. I'm still in contact with him. I spoke with him briefly over Facebook when we were like a few weeks after we were released. Because when we surrendered, I spent about the first month with him in the first location where I got beaten and stabbed. And then the second month I got moved to the prison, and when I was in that cell, I was in a prison cell with the major in my battalion. So we became like pretty close friends, like pretty much family now, like the way we speak to each other. Um, when when I was in the prison though, at some point, I think it was like the end of May, he got taken out, and at that point, I thought he like got released and like was basically released. So for a long time, like while I was in prison, like that played on me mentally, like seeing all the guys get released, like that I'd fought. And then when I got released, I like went to like try and like track him down, and it turns out that he wasn't released. So I was a bit disappointed. And then I think it was a month later that he was released. So like I was like really excited when I saw that and like contacted him. I think one of the other things I was doing as well was just trying to remember like everyone I'd come in contact. I was like contacting their families, um, like just telling them that I've seen them, they're okay, they're still alive. And a lot of that was like just trying to track people through like Facebook friends and mutual friends and stuff.
Oh yeah, fair enough. And now, obviously you're still in contact with some people and just overall keeping up with the news. How do you see the future of this conflict? Do you think Ukraine has actually shown especially in recent months, do you think they've shown good sort of progress in towards achieving their territorial defense?
Yeah, I mean it's difficult to say. Obviously, I knew like when the invasion started, like when I initially found out like to what extent the invasion was, um, like my first reaction was like fucking like Putin's out of his mind if he's like thinking this is a good idea. My realistic like expectation was that they were going to invade like Donbass and come from Crimea, but like when I saw the scale of what they did, like I was thinking this is going to end up in failure. They're not going to be able to like achieve what they want to achieve. Like, it's too much ground like to try and take. And then obviously like the Ukrainians have a like massive support from the West now with like equipment and stuff, which has been helping in the fight like to defend Ukraine. Um, it's hard to say. I don't think it will end in any victory, but on either side, I think either way, some sort of an agreement is going to come into place. But I think Russia's going to end up losing out on quite a lot of its territory that it's claimed in regards to like ending the conflict. I think at a push, like my realistic expectation is that probably the Crimea corridor and probably maybe Luhansk if they get to it. Or it depends like how close like the lines start moving or whatnot. Worst case scenario, I'd say like they keep the Crimea corridor and Donbass and Luhansk, and there's just a ceasefire or an end to the war. Or like best case scenario is that they take back Luhansk and Donbass and the Crimea corridor. Crimea, I'm not 100% sure on at the moment. It's like really difficult to say, like there's a lot of like complicated like scenarios involved with it as well. Like anything could happen. I don't think Russia has the power now to like go all in. They've pretty much like exhausted a lot of what they had in the beginning. I mean, we might see some like Ukrainian losses. I think Bakhmut might be about to fall if it's not like secured like soon. Just from what I've been seeing like through like the open source intelligence community and stuff. They might end up in a situation like Mariupol cut off. So it's hard to say exactly like where this war is going to go, but I think it will have a high chance of like being prolonged into maybe a few years, similar to that in the Yugoslavia conflict.
No, yeah, fair enough. So yeah, obviously, thank you for that analysis. It's always nice to hear, especially from someone that's been on the ground and knows how it's there. So yeah, just to wrap this up, thank you again, for agreeing to the short interview. Just to wrap this up, have you faced any challenges, whether it's in terms of law enforcement or something else, upon your return? So are you free to travel? How has your daily life been affected by your time in Ukraine?
No, since I've been back, like the British government, they've been like fully supportive, like of like helping me like readjust. When we came back, like we had like armed police like just escort us off just to get out the presses like way and whatnot, and that the government like gave us like the contacts for like mental health like groups and stuff like to help us like with being through capture and whatnot. So like they've been supportive. I've got my passport back. I'm just waiting at the moment to just get some immigration documents sorted with my citizenship, so I can like go back to Ukraine as a citizen. Other than that, like the British government, they've like, been really good, like in the way they've like helped us like get back into Britain. So we haven't like faced any like legal like situations or anything like that.
No, yeah, that's good to hear. And so, yeah, that wraps up our interview.